Margaret stepped off the stagecoach and immediately understood why 5 women before her had fled within a week. The Apache rancher waiting for her wasn't welcoming. He stood with arms crossed, his face carved from stone, radiating barely contained anger. The ranch behind him looked harsh and unwelcoming, miles from town with nothing but scrubland and distant mountains. This was Jesse Blackwater, the man whose advertisement had grown increasingly desperate in the marriage broker's files. The broker had warned her. Jesse was impossible, hostile, deliberately cruel to drive brides away. No one knew why he kept ordering brides if he wanted them gone, but 5 women had returned to the broker in tears, speaking of his cold silence, his deliberate rudeness, his clear desire to be left alone. Margaret was the 6th attempt, chosen because the broker was running out of options. What happened next would prove that sometimes the hardest people to love are simply the most afraid, and true strength lies not in fighting battles, but in refusing to run from them. But before we continue with this powerful story, if you believe in the power of perseverance and seeing past anger to pain, hit that like button and subscribe, because we share stories of real courage every day. You won't last either, Jesse said flatly as Margaret approached. Might as well get back on that coach and save us both the trouble. Margaret looked him square in the eye. I signed a contract. I intend to honor it. Whether you make that easy or difficult is your choice, but I'm not leaving. Something flickered across Jesse's face, surprise perhaps, before the mask of hostility returned. Suit yourself. Don't expect me to make you comfortable. He turned and walked toward the ranch without offering to carry her bags. Margaret picked up her carpet bag and followed. The ranch house was sparse, clean but cold, lacking any warmth or personal touches. Jesse showed her to a small room, gestured vaguely toward the kitchen, and disappeared outside. Margaret unpacked, surveyed the pantry, and got to work. That evening, Jesse returned to find dinner on the table. He sat without comment, ate without acknowledgement, and left his dishes where they sat. Margaret cleaned them without complaint. The next morning, she rose early, made breakfast, and had it ready when he came in from morning chores. Again, silence. Again, no thanks. This pattern continued for 3 days. Jesse's hostility became more pronounced. He tracked mud deliberately across floors Margaret had just cleaned. He criticized every meal, finding fault with seasoning or temperature. He made noise at night to disturb her sleep. He was systematically trying to break her will, to make her leave like the others. On the 4th morning, Margaret found her belongings packed and sitting by the front door. Jesse stood waiting, his expression hard. Stage comes through today. You can catch it back to town. No, Margaret said simply, and unpacked her bags. I said you're leaving. And I said no. I signed a contract for 1 year. I've been here 4 days. We have 357 days remaining, and I intend to stay for every single one. Now you might wonder what makes someone stay in the face of such hostility, what strength it takes to see past cruelty to whatever lies beneath. Share your thoughts in the comments about persistence and looking deeper, because this story shows the courage it takes to not give up on people. Jesse's mask cracked slightly. Why? Why would you stay where you're clearly not wanted? Because I don't believe you don't want me here, Margaret said calmly. I believe you're terrified that I might stay, so you're doing everything possible to drive me away before you risk caring about someone again. I recognize the behavior because I've seen it before. You don't know anything about me, then tell me. Tell me why you keep ordering brides only to chase them off. Tell me what hurt you so badly that loneliness seems safer than connection. Jesse's jaw worked, anger and something else, pain perhaps, warring in his expression. My wife died, he finally said. 3 years ago, childbirth, the baby too. I couldn't save them. Couldn't do anything but watch them die. His voice was rough. The ranch felt empty, so I sent for a bride. But when she arrived, I couldn't do it. Couldn't risk feeling that kind of loss again. So I made her leave. Then I felt guilty and sent for another. Same result. 5 times I've done this. 5 times I've proven I'm too broken for this. Margaret felt her heart crack for this man standing before her, armored in anger to protect a wounded heart. You're not broken. You're grieving. There's a difference. It's been 3 years. Grief should be done by now. Grief doesn't have a timeline. And it doesn't mean you're incapable of love again. It just means you loved deeply before. Margaret stepped closer. I lost my husband too, 2 years ago. Influenza took him in 3 days. I understand the fear of caring again, of risking that pain. But Jesse, loneliness is its own kind of death. Slower maybe, but just as final. Jesse looked away, his throat working. I don't want to hurt you. Every woman who's come here, I've hurt them with my coldness. It's kinder to drive you away now. Let me decide what's kind, Margaret said firmly. I'm not fragile. I'm not some delicate flower who'll wilt under harsh conditions. I'm a woman who survived loss and hardship and kept going. I can handle your grief and your fear. What I won't handle is being dismissed without being given a chance. For the first time, Jesse really looked at her, saw the strength in her stance, the determination in her eyes, the genuine compassion in her expression. You really won't leave? Not unless you can look me in the eye and honestly tell me you want me gone. Not because you're afraid, but because you genuinely don't want partnership or companionship. Can you say that? Jesse was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I can't. Then stop trying to drive me away and let me stay. Let me be your friend, at least. We don't have to be anything more, but let's stop this war and try simple coexistence. The change wasn't immediate. Jesse's walls had been built over 3 years and wouldn't crumble in days. But slowly Margaret's steady presence began to soften his defenses. She didn't demand affection or gratitude. She simply existed in his space, competent and calm, weathering his occasional storms without retreating. One evening, 2 months after her arrival, Jesse found Margaret mending his shirts. He sat across from her, watching her careful stitches. Why didn't you leave? He asked quietly. Not just because of the contract. Really, why? Margaret looked up. Because I saw past your anger to your pain. Because I recognized someone who was drowning and kept pushing away the lifeline. Because I'm stubborn, and once I commit to something, I see it through. She paused. And because I saw glimpses of who you really are, beneath all that armor. I saw gentleness in how you care for injured animals. I saw intelligence in how you manage this ranch. I saw someone worth knowing, if only he'd let himself be known. Jesse felt something in his chest loosen, a tightness he'd carried for 3 years beginning to ease. I don't deserve your patience. Probably not, Margaret agreed with a slight smile. But you have it anyway. That's what partnership means, Jesse. Staying through the difficult parts. Giving grace when it's not earned. Believing in someone's better self even when they've forgotten it exists. Years later, when people asked about their marriage, Jesse would tell them honestly about the 5 brides he'd driven away, about the anger and fear that had ruled him. And he'd tell them about the woman who'd refused to leave, who'd seen through his cruelty to his pain and had the strength to stay when staying was hard. Margaret had saved his life not through grand gestures but through simple persistence, through showing up every day and refusing to give up on him when he'd given up on himself. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that the people who push hardest are often the ones hurting most, please share it today. Maybe someone needs the courage to stay when things are hard, or maybe someone needs to know their walls aren't protecting them but isolating them. Subscribe for more stories about real love, real persistence, and the courage to not give up on people. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.